Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that I know a lot of you are curious about, sugar.
Yes.
Now, you guys have sent in a ton of questions about this, and you've also flagged some really interesting articles and research snippets that we're going to be using as kind of the jumping off point for our deep dive today.
Right.
But before we get into all of that, for those of you who are new to the deep dive, I'd like to quickly introduce our expert
Right.
who is here with us today to help break down this complex topic.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to delve into the world of sugar with you all today.
Awesome. So let's start by kind of setting the stage here.
Yep.
We all love a good sweet treat, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love, a donut or cake or some chocolate every now and then?
Yeah, exactly. But what does science actually have to say about
Right.
the impact of all these sweet treats on our health?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers have been exploring in depth,
Mm-hmm.
for quite some time now.
Yeah.
One of the things that really jumped out at me from the news alerts and the research snippets that you sent over
Yeah.
was a study that linked a love for sugary foods
Yeah.
to a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
That's the one that really caught my eye, too.
It's definitely significant, and I think it's something that we should all be aware of,
Yeah.
because it's not just about, enjoying those sweet treats in moderation. It's about understanding the potential long-term consequences
Yeah.
of consistently consuming large amounts of sugar.
Yeah, and I think that's where things get a little bit tricky, right? Because it's
Huh.
so easy to kind of indulge in those sweet treats, especially,
Yeah.
when we're stressed or tired or just,
Yeah,
looking for a little pick-me-up.
exactly. And it's, those sugary treats are designed to be
Oh, yeah.
addictive, right?
Oh.
They trigger those reward centers in our brain and make us want to come back for more.
So can you kind of break down for us why this connection exists between sugar and type 2 diabetes?
Sure. So essentially, when we consume sugar, our bodies break it down into glucose, which
Right.
enters our bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
And our pancreas, which is this amazing little organ, releases insulin to help our cells absorb that glucose and use it for energy.
Okay.
But when we consistently consume too much sugar, our pancreas has to work overtime to produce enough insulin to keep up.
Right.
And over time, this can lead to something called insulin resistance, which means our cells become less responsive to insulin signals.
So it's almost like
Yeah,
our bodies are getting a little bit numb to
exactly.
the insulin, like it's not as effective anymore.
Exactly. It's like, if you keep hitting the snooze button over and over again, eventually the alarm clock just doesn't wake you up anymore.
I like that analogy.
And so when our cells become insulin resistant, it means that the glucose isn't being absorbed properly and it starts to build up in our bloodstream.
Mm.
And this can lead to a whole cascade of health problems, including type 2 diabetes.
Got it. So it's really that kind of like
Overwork.
working of the pancreas that
Keeps
can
running.
lead to these issues down the road.
Precisely. It's like any factory, if you keep pushing it beyond its capacity, eventually it's going to start to break down.
And we definitely don't want our pancreases breaking down.
No, definitely not.
Now, one thing that I found encouraging from that same article was that
Yeah.
they also mentioned that replacing those sugary treats with healthier options can actually help to reduce that risk.
Absolutely. That's a really important point. It's something that I always emphasize to my patients.
Yeah.
It's not about completely eliminating all sweetness from your life. It's about making those smart swaps and choosing foods that are naturally sweet,
Hmm.
like fruits, for example.
Yeah.
Fruits are packed with natural sugars, but they also come with fiber and vitamins and minerals
Right.
that can help to regulate our blood sugar levels and keep our pancreas happy.
So it's really about, I guess, kind of shifting our mindset a little bit about what we consider to be sweet and satisfying.
Exactly. It's about expanding our definition of sweetness beyond those processed sugary treats
I like that.
and embracing the natural sweetness that's found in whole foods.
Yeah, it's like retraining our taste buds in a way,
Absolutely. And it's something that we can all do gradually,
right?
starting with small changes and slowly incorporating more whole foods into our diet.
So speaking of managing sugar intake, you also sent over some research on low-calorie sweeteners.
Yes.
And I know these are like super popular these days.
No, they are. They are everywhere.
They're marketed as kind of this like guilt-free way to enjoy sweetness without the calories.
Right.
But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these. Are they really as good as they seem?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mhm.
Low-calorie sweeteners like aspartame and stevia and sucralose,
Mm-hmm.
they've been around for a while, and millions of people use them worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
But, the research on their long-term effects is still ongoing.
That's what I was kind of wondering about because,
Yeah.
I feel like I keep seeing, conflicting information about them.
Right. And that's because, science is constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And as we learn more about these sweeteners,
Mm-hmm.
our understanding of their impact on our health may change.
One study that you sent over mentioned that aspartame in particular could potentially impact our gut health
Yes.
by altering the balance of bacteria in our digestive system.
Right. That's a very interesting area of
Yeesh.
research and one that I'm following closely.
Yeah.
You see, our gut microbiome, which is basically the trillions of bacteria that live in our digestive tract, plays a crucial role in our overall health.
Mm-hmm.
And some studies suggest that certain artificial sweeteners might disrupt this delicate balance of bacteria,
Yeah.
which could potentially lead to, issues like bloating and gas or even more serious digestive problems.
So it's not just about, the calories or the lack thereof. It's
Right.
about how these sweeteners are actually interacting with our bodies on a much deeper level.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to be mindful of our intake of these sweeteners
Yeah.
and to,
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to how our bodies respond to them.
Now, shifting gears a bit, you also included some research on the impact of kind of everyday foods like rice, bread, noodles, and potatoes on our health.
Yes.
What was it about those particular foods that...
So one of the articles discussed how these foods, particularly the refined versions like white rice and white bread, can potentially contribute to something called mitochondrial slowdown.
Mitochondrial slowdown. That sounds
It does sound a bit intimidating, doesn't it?
kind of scary. Yeah.
But it's actually quite fascinating.
Okay.
You see, mitochondria are these tiny little powerhouses within our cells.
Mm.
They're responsible for converting the food we eat into usable energy.
Oh, okay.
So when they slow down, our metabolism can take a hit. And this can potentially lead to weight gain and other health issues.
So it's not just about the calories in those foods.
Right.
It's also about how they're impacting those
It's
tiny little energy factories within our cells.
a whole new way of thinking about what we eat, isn't it?
It is.
And while these foods are staples in many cultures, choosing whole grain options like brown rice and whole wheat bread can make a big difference.
So those are the ones that are less processed.
Right. They contain more fiber, which helps regulate our blood sugar levels and keep those mitochondria humming along smoothly.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily about completely cutting out those foods.
No, not at all.
It's just about
It's about making those smart swaps,
choosing
choosing the versions that are going to be more supportive of our overall health.
more nutrient-dense options.
Exactly.
Wow, this is already making me rethink my grocery list.
Well, that's a good thing.
It is.
It's all about, empowering ourselves with knowledge so we
Mhm.
can make those informed choices.
I feel like I'm learning so much already.
Me too. It's always fascinating to delve into these topics.
Before we move on to part 2, I'm curious to hear what's really resonated with you so far from our discussion.
What stood out to me the most is how interconnected everything is.
Hmm.
We've talked about sugar and diabetes, low-calorie sweeteners, now the impact of everyday foods on our mitochondria.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
It all comes back to that
It does.
kind of holistic view of,
Exactly. Our bodies are complex systems,
right?
and what we put into them matters.
It's not about deprivation.
No,
It's about understanding the science and making those informed choices.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, well, we'll be back in just a moment to continue our exploration of the world of sugar. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into some potential solutions and strategies for making healthier choices. So before the break, we were just starting to talk about how the food that we eat can actually impact those tiny little powerhouses in our cells, the mitochondria.
Yes, and we were specifically talking about how choosing whole grains over refined grains can make a big difference in keeping those mitochondria functioning optimally.
Yeah, and one of the articles you sent over actually mentioned a study where participants who switched from white rice to brown rice for just 8 weeks
Oh, wow.
saw a noticeable improvement in their mitochondrial function.
That's amazing. It
Yeah.
really shows you the power of making even small changes to your diet.
Right. It's not always about these massive overhauls. Sometimes it's those little tweaks that can have a big impact.
Exactly. And it's not just about the type of carbs we choose either. It's also about being mindful of our portion sizes.
That's a good point.
Even with healthy foods, if we overindulge, it can still put a strain on our bodies.
Right. It's all about finding that balance.
Exactly.
Now, I want to circle back to the topic of low-calorie sweeteners for a moment, because I know we were talking about like the ongoing research into their long-term effect, especially regarding gut health. And I know millions of people are using these sweeteners every single day. So are there any like specific concerns that we should be keeping in mind?
Well, one area that researchers are looking into is the potential impact of some artificial sweeteners on the diversity of our gut bacteria.
Oh.
You see, our gut microbiome, which is basically this incredible ecosystem of trillions of bacteria living in our digestive tract,
Yeah,
it plays a crucial role in our overall health.
right.
It affects everything from digestion to immunity to even our mental health.
Wow.
And some studies have suggested that certain sweeteners might disrupt the delicate balance of bacteria in our gut.
Okay.
And this could potentially lead to issues like bloating and gas, or even more serious digestive problems down the line.
So it's not just about like the calories or the lack thereof. It's really about how these sweeteners are actually interacting with our bodies.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to pay attention to how our bodies feel when we consume these sweeteners.
Right. Like if you notice that you're experiencing digestive issues after having like a diet soda or something, that might be a sign that your body's not loving those artificial sweeteners.
Exactly. It's all about listening to our bodies and figuring out what works best for us.
Yeah, so I guess it's not as simple as saying all low-calorie sweeteners are good or bad. It's really about
Right.
understanding the potential benefits and risks and making informed choices.
I could agree more. And it's important to remember that everyone's body is different.
Mm-hmm.
What works well for one person might not have the same effect on another.
So it's all about personalization.
Absolutely, finding what works best for you.
Now, you mentioned earlier that there are also natural low-calorie sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit that have been used for centuries in different cultures.
Yes, those are great options to consider as well.
Have you personally experimented with those at all in your own like cooking or baking?
I have. Stevia can be a bit tricky to work with because it has a slightly different taste profile than sugar.
Oh.
But I've had some success using it in smoothies and yogurt.
Yeah.
Monk fruit, on the other hand, is a bit milder and blends well in baked goods.
That's good to know. I feel like I need to do some more experimenting in the kitchen.
I encourage you to. It's amazing how many natural sweeteners are out there just waiting to be discovered.
I love that. So it's not about restriction, it's about exploration and finding those healthy options that still bring us joy.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive today.
What stands out to you the most?
The realization that even the smallest choices can make a difference. Whether it's swapping white rice for brown rice, being mindful of our portion sizes, or exploring those natural sweeteners, it all ends up.
It's like a ripple effect.
It is. And it's empowering to know that we have more control over our health than we might think.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that it's not about being perfect, it's about making those conscious choices.
Right. It's a journey, not a destination.
And sometimes the most delicious discoveries happen when we step outside our comfort zones.
I completely agree.
Remember earlier when we were talking about designing that perfect, healthy, but delicious dessert?
Yes. I'm still thinking about that.
Me too. I'm already brainstorming some ideas.
Oh, tell me more.
I'm thinking a dessert featuring fresh berries, a touch of natural sweetness from honey or maple syrup, and maybe some crunchy nuts for added texture.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I love the idea of incorporating fresh fruit and those natural ingredients.
Right, and the crunch from the nuts is just like an added bonus.
It's amazing how creative we can get when we start thinking outside the box.
And embrace a more holistic approach to our sweet treats.
Exactly.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the science of sugar to the nuances of low-calorie sweeteners and the importance of a balanced diet.
It's been a great discussion.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how our bodies process sugar and the impact of different food choices, the better equipped we are to make decisions that support our health.
It's about being curious, staying informed, and finding that sweet spot where enjoyment and well-being coexist.
Beautifully said.
It's not about deprivation or strict rules. It's about empowering ourselves to make choices that align with our individual needs and preferences.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, it seems like our deep dive into the world of sugar is coming to a close.
It is.
But hopefully this is just the beginning of, a more mindful approach to
Right.
those sweet treats that we all enjoy.
Exactly. It's a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination.
Before we sign off, I'd love to just quickly recap
Sure.
some of those key insights that we've uncovered.
Okay,
during this exploration.
we started by acknowledging that, our love for sugary foods can sometimes come with consequences, especially when it comes to the risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Right, and we talked about how, when we overload on sugar, our pancreas,
That little insulin factory.
yeah, that little insulin factory can get, overworked,
Overworked, exactly.
leading to insulin resistance and potentially even type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Then we took a deep dive into the world of low-calorie sweetener.
Yes, those tempting little alternatives.
They promise sweetness without the calories.
Right, but as we learned, there's still a lot that we don't know about their long-term effects.
Especially when it comes to our gut health.
Yes, and speaking of gut health, we also explored some natural low-calorie sweeteners, like stevia and monk fruit.
Yeah, the ones that have been used for centuries in different cultures.
Exactly, and one of the studies you shared actually compared the impact of stevia versus aspartame on blood sugar levels after meals.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
And it found that stevia actually had a less pronounced effect.
Interesting. So it seems like there's always more to learn when it comes to these sweeteners.
Absolutely.
But I think, the most empowering takeaway from all of this is that we really do have a lot more control over our health
We do.
than we might think.
Yes, it's not about deprivation. It's about making those conscious choices and exploring those healthier alternatives.
Like swapping white rice for brown rice or reaching for a piece of fruit instead of a candy bar.
Exactly. Those small choices can make a big difference.
It's all about, finding that balance.
It is.
Remember earlier when we were talking about designing the perfect, healthy, but delicious dessert?
Yes. I'm still dreaming about that.
I think I have an idea.
Okay, I'm listening.
I am picturing a parfait
Okay.
with layers of Greek yogurt, fresh berries, a drizzle of honey, and a sprinkle of chopped nuts.
That sounds delicious and nutritious.
Right. We can indulge our sweet tooth without compromising our health goals.
Absolutely. It's all about getting creative and finding those sweet spots where flavor and well-being come together.
Well said. It's been such a pleasure diving deep with you today.
Likewise, I've enjoyed our conversation.
And I feel like we've learned so much about how to make more mindful choices when it comes to sugar.
Me too. And I hope our listeners feel empowered to do the same.
So that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of sugar.
Until next time.
Stay curious and keep exploring all those delicious possibilities out there.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Thanks for joining us.